The 2020 Minority Health Film Festival offers a diverse variety of films and events that we just wouldn't be able to offer in the in-person cinema experience. But I think what really makes it unique is the focus not only on public health issues, but the issues that really concern communities of color. If you're looking for a reason to engage or to try it out, this is the perfect time. Just go to mkefilm.org/MHFF.
Hello, everybody. My name is Kirsten Larson, and I'm a programming director at Milwaukee Film. And I'm so excited that we are joined today by Dr. Delaney Ruston, who's the director of 2 films in this year's Minority Health Film Festival. And our festival this year is presented by Frater and the Medical College of Wisconsin, so we're very grateful for their support. But to get started, we will have Dr. Ruston introduce herself. So would you like to say hello and tell us a bit about your films that are in the festival?
Yes. Oh, well, I'm so glad to be here and to first have Screenagers, Growing Up in the Digital Age, which looks at my story with my tweens and teens related to my struggle to figure out the impact of screen time and solutions as a mom, how to help them have healthy screen time. And it also looks at other stories and science. And the other film is Screenagers Next Chapter, which delves into more deeply the social and emotional issues facing our teens today, and looking at how does screen time interact and the ups and sides and the downsides of that. And again, follows my journey with my kids, primarily my teen daughter, and many other stories. And again, lots of science in. And for me, really, it's all about looking at solutions. There's a lot of documentaries out there that spend a lot of time really focused on, and they're gripping the stories of the problems. And then, a little bit at the end, like what you can do. But for me, have always been interested in how you make narrative storytelling that is really looking also very deeply at solutions and strategies.
Thank you so much for that overview. So I'm going to get started with a few questions, but just so everyone in the audience knows, you can submit your questions on whatever social media platform you're on, and then it will pop up on our browser and we can ask it live. So start thinking of stuff and we'll take a look at that later. But to start out, I just wanted to hear how you decided you wanted to be both a primary care physician and a documentary filmmaker.
Well, I grew up in Berkeley, California, in a very alternative and challenging childhood. But one of the things that I just lived with my mom, no siblings, and for income reasons, she would rent out rooms in our small home, and she and I shared a room at times. And one of the people was a documentary filmmaker editor. And I used to go and watch documentaries, and I loved real life films. I've always liked, if they're narratives, I just want them to feel so real. And then I think it was I worked in movie theaters and college working movie theaters and taking film classes. So I always loved the medium, but I also liked science and the idea of, working in communities that really needed service. I had gotten my healthcare at times at Berkeley Free Clinic and really wanted to serve in the same way. So I decided to go to med school, but it was during med school that the video cameras became accessible to the general public, and things were no longer just film. And not these huge video cameras that they use, beta tape for the news. So I started doing Man on the Street, and I started really thinking more about trying to make some films. And eventually, in my residency in San Francisco, I started taking film classes at the same time I was doing my residency. And the interesting thing was, at the end of the 3 years of medicine residency, you have to do a big presentation to all your colleagues on some topic, chronic heart failure, or kidney disease or something. And I said to the professors and the other physicians that I wanted my time to be making a documentary. And I had a patient, and her who was older, and her daughter didn't want her to know her cancer had come back. And no one had taught us about these things. And the family is willing to be in the film. And so when I went to the higher ups at UCSF and said, I want to make this short film for my research time and my research presentation, they said, no, like you can't do that. That's not academic. Luckily, as might have it, that when people say no, it only made me more intrigued to do it. And I was able to get the permission, and I made my first short documentary called If She Knew, about this family, and interwove it with some key experts looking at just cultural diversity related to withholding bad news at families' requests, and how do you do that ethically? So I've long been interested, and partly why I'm excited to be at this film festival is cultural issues, and I can talk about other films later that touch on that. But of course, we're mainly here talking about Screenagers. But I just wanted to give you that overview. So for the past 20 or so years, I've been dividing my time between different research and academic time, and primarily serving underserved populations in clinics like I do now. Like Monday, I'll be back in clinic, as well as making social documentaries for change.
That's wonderful. And so specifically with Screenagers, how did you get inspired to make that documentary?
Well, I was influenced. I was actually living with my family in India at the time, and the school was giving out iPads to all the middle schoolers. And my son, we had made sure he had plenty of time off screens, and he at that time didn't have an iPhone or anything, but they were going to be giving him an iPad, and it was going to be a whole new situation because that was going to be at home too. And I said, whoa, this is really different. So I actually started to film teenagers in this international school as just kind of, researching it, figuring it out. And I was like at home struggling so much with my kids. In the meantime, sure enough, he got that device, and Tessa wanted a phone, and things just got really out of hand. So the more I felt like things were confusing, and I was doing this thing where I would stab them with my eyes and grab whatever device they had in their hands, and I just didn't feel like I was parenting it well. I said, you know what? I'm going to, as a physician, kind of look at the impact of screen time, and then look at strategies that in schools and parents, and through lots of stories, and through kids and teens, figure out some strategies moving forward, and how we can really just work better to ensure healthy screen time choices, as well as plenty of time off screens.
Mm-hmm. And then it seems like a lot of the films you make are about very personal topics, whether it's about your father and schizophrenia, or about your teens and their screen time. Do you ever have a hard time making documentaries about such personal topics so close to home?
Well, as many probably people here, you get kind of influenced by a certain type of film that really resonate with you. Mm-hmm. And for me, this woman, Judith Helfand, had been doing personal documentaries back when I was really studying film. She did one called Healthy Baby Girl, about how her mother was taking medicine for her morning sickness, which ultimately caused the filmmaker to be infertile. And she made a very gripping documentary that followed her journey to talk to her mother about this as well. And through that, it just hit me so hard. Like, personal documentaries can be so powerful. And when I had been disconnected from my father for a long time, and decided to reconnect with him, there were so many reasons why making the film really resonated because I was kind of scared, and I figured anything that could happen would, be okay. I'd be filming, and then also as a physician, I knew how many families were disconnected because of mental health issues, not because of the illness so much, but because services were so lacking. When the truth is, with Screenagers, I didn't plan to be in it. I was like, okay, I'm a real filmmaker now. I'm just going to make one of those like flashy documentaries and not be in it. And I was shocked. I would go around and ask families, are you struggling with this? Is this hard? Oh yeah, Delaney, it's so hard. And I'd be like, okay, great. I totally understand. Let's find solutions. How do you guys feel if I film a little bit? Oh no. And I learned that parenting is really one of the most private things that our culture really continues to push that. And here we are in this tech revolution. And so to really get what I really love is verite and real moments between people. I started to film a little bit in our house. And what was amazing is we didn't actually even film that much, but we got, the kind of the stuff that happens, and it created that narrative arc through the film.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I did notice that in the film that you are talking to families about such personal things, and then also sort of getting an inside look at how schools work when they're dealing with technology in the classroom. And was it in the instances where you did get families to open up to you or permission in the school, was it difficult to get that access? Or process like, because I know we have documentary filmmakers a lot of the times who work in schools, and it's just so hard to sort of get a little window into that world.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And so I went to Los Angeles had recently passed a kind of a mandate that they were going to give out iPads to families and to students. And they were going to roll this out like school by school, but pretty quickly. And there was a lot of all of a sudden, wait a sec, is this how we want to spend our limited resources? What about, and so they also started to see there was some controversy because it turns out, as you can imagine, when you give out the tool, that's not the expensive part. Then it's all the software in there, all the educational, which once you're kind of hooked on that, they can keep rising the prices. So there's lots of issues happening and deals were being made. So I wanted to film there. And when I it's so many hours. It is so many hours. But finally found a connection of a principal at a high school. LA is really protective because they have the Hollywood industry there. So they're like, no, you have to meet with a board. We are really protected. But through him, I went to the high school. I literally met a mom in the parking lot. She actually was still in her car. And I just got this feeling from her. I'm like, hey, could I maybe film you and your kids? And she let me come to her home and film, and that's a wonderful story in the film. And then some of the teenagers I didn't film at the school, but through him who wanted to be a part of it, we went to a park and filmed some, for example. In Seattle, fortunately, I was able to get access to and film in a high school there. So it's always case by case, and then families, it's really just throwing out to everyone. What have you been hearing? And then people will get back to me. It's a true love and true tenacity to find stories and to find people that want to, and to make sure that they really want to, and make sure, particularly when you're dealing with kids. So and yet I have to say, so often, they're so happy. In fact, I have a podcast now, Screenagers podcast. And in Screenagers, you meet a young man who had behavioral addiction towards constantly playing video games, to the point in first year of his college, after a few weeks, he was just flunking out of classes, and he literally leaves, runs away, gets in his car in the middle of the night. And now you see him that he's in a recovery place trying to get his life back, because as true addiction does, he had lost so much and had experienced so many negative consequences. And when I interviewed him recently for the Screenagers podcast, and he said, Delaney, it was so great to do that film with you because, you know, speaking out about this and now he works at the same place he got treatment. When I do this work, I feel like it was all for a purpose, that I went through the pain that I did. And it makes it have some meaning to what I went through. So I'm fortunate that the students and kids and who have been in the films have all been totally fine with it, but it's you have to work to make sure that's going to be the case.
Absolutely. So it's interesting to hear you talk about how the different subjects who are in the film have responded to it. I'm curious how other different audiences have responded to the movie over the years, whether it's other teens or different school administrators, if there's been a positive response, if are like, no, that's not true, we don't feel that way, or how it's gone over.
Yeah. Well, definitely, you know, it's been in many schools as both to bring parents and kids and teens together to watch in the evenings, or also students during the day. And it's really about, the whole film is about that conversation. And there are so many people who've reached out to say, we kept talking about it driving home. We've been talking about it for weeks. And in the film, you learn about something called Tech Talk Tuesdays, which is my ability and my family to make sure we're talking in a way that we talk weekly about something positive in the film. I mean, positive about technology, and then talk about issues. These are communication strategies that have made parenting this so much better. So they talk about how the film just fosters so much discussion, and that's really it. And, you know, there's some great times when a teen I remember said, after seeing Andrew, the person I just talked about who was in recovery, he was young, like 11, said, I was going to ask for an Xbox for Christmas, but I'm not going to. And another young boy and his parent, I was in New York at the time, they came up to me and they said, oh, we just are going to the pet store because we want to make sure he has other things to do, not just video gaming. And the kid was going to get a lizard. It was really cute. But and then some kids like 11, 12 are really into it. Some teens still feel like they have a reaction like it's why not more of the positives about screen time? And I say, if we did I get it. If we did the positives around screen time, it would be a Ken Burns type documentary for 24-hour marathon. But it is for all of us, whenever we look at one side more, but particularly for teens, the brain has a hard time holding two truths simultaneously. There's so much good stuff about our tech revolution, and there's things that are hard. And in fact, when I work with teens, a lot of it is saying to them, it's because it's so good. And a lot of what you're doing is consuming other people's games, other people's shows, other things. How do we, like what you guys do there, how do we ensure that you have time during this really important developmental creative time in your life to be creating your own music, your own videos, your own things, and as well as online, as well as offline? So I think that there can... So it's a whole across the board, but everyone, it definitely gets people thinking. And overall, kids and teens really love that they feel like the stories are authentic. And that's what I've taken away from this, is how much they want authentic, gritty, and to have real discussions about things.
Definitely. And I thought it was a bit encouraging and refreshing in the film where you see some of the kids talking about how they'll have like their friends set a new password so they don't look at their phone, or that they're like, I guess I probably should go outside a little bit more. Especially during quarantine, we're all just stuck looking at our screens all the time and can't really interact with people. I feel like we were on a trajectory for just virtual world to take over everything. And I feel like there's still a demand from everyone to have in-face personal experiences with people. So I am happy to see that in your film as well. But that also brings up something I'm curious about currently, which with those Tech Talk Tuesdays that you do, since they keep everything up to date and it's such a developing situation all the time, technology, how you see technology with like virtual schooling and virtual work playing into this whole Screenagers phenomenon and how parents can regulate that.
Well, and definitely let me say that Tech Talk Tuesdays are all about how do we have effective, different, what I have seen so much is what schools tend to do in general when it comes to things that concern us as adults and parents, like, are they getting their homework done? Sexting, like a whole list of things. They'll say, oh, well, talk to your kid about all these issues, talk to them about pornography. And you're like, wait, how? And rather than a scare tactic, I'm really interested in a share tactic. How do we share science and stories that engages our kids? So Tech Talk Tuesdays are all about different stories and science and it takes a topic. So it might be on, how are some ways to think about attention in these times? And so it'll be, or how do we think about sexting? What are ways to talk with your teens about? And here's a story you might want to share. And I have to say that's one of the things I'm most excited about it, because hundreds of thousands of families are doing this with their kids and teens. And it's not always on Tuesdays, but they go to the website, Screenagers Movie, and they find them and pick topics that they want and bring that up. And I think that is what is so key right now, no matter what, that we're having calm conversations, little ones now and then about this, because some families are, like you're saying, just are overwhelmed, and they might not even try to have any rules or have any discussions because it's so triggered and it just feels like, what do we do? And the reality is now's a time to still be engaged. There was a New York Times article that said, in March, it said the coronavirus has ended the screen time debate. Screens have won. And it is true, which has never been the debate. Let me just say that the debate's always been, how do we help kids and teens have healthy screen time and plenty of time off of it? And we as teachers and adults can be interweaving strategies that are effective with kids and teens now, even during COVID. So, now we're going to have one-to-one in a much more intense way, right? We're getting devices we're working hard to get devices. And the reality is that at home, kids are on these devices and it's hard for them. They're sitting, they're not seeing their friends. We know social and emotional well-being is going down. It makes perfect sense. We're in an awful time. Are there some upsides? There are ways that this is helping to. Some teens say they're able to talk with their teacher a little bit more than a way they couldn't. Some are able to sleep in more because we have a major problem with early start times prior to this. Some are, but the downside is that if the kid is not naturally inclined to ensure that they're getting out for some exercise or having quality time on one-to-one with a friend online, or being distant but going outside, or doing something offline that they're competent. My goal is to help parents not just throw up their hands and to try to find effective ways, particularly for teens, where when we step into problem solve, good chance it's only going to make it worse. So again, lots of different strategies of how to work with, an example. What if your teen isn't having much relationship with anyone really? How about call a grandparent that they like and have that grandparent say, I want to talk to them about how I went through some really hard period of time. And then to see if that grandparent would maybe say, hey, can we do this once a week? So making these, we just have to be more intentional and find little wins that we can have. I think that kind of answered a few questions there, but so you can, I'll leave it to you if there's some follow-up for that. I didn't get deeply into schoolwork and academia, but I'll let you decide where we should go from here.
No, that was all completely great. Thank you so much. I also wanted to ask a bit more because in the movie you mentioned how, I believe it was when families introduce new technology into their home, that was shown to worsen the racial achievement gap in people. And I was wondering if you could expand a bit more on that or talk about any other trends along race lines that you noticed during your research for the film.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that is true that was talked about in the film is a big study was done in North Carolina in the late 90s, where they were able to see test scores, and they were also able to track it by these surveys they were doing of when computers came into the home. And pretty much across the board, but high income families, that it was hard because a lot of them already had full computer and internet access. But in the low income families, they found that when computers came in the home, test scores went down, not actually up on average. And there's a real concern about when they're, because of socioeconomic issues, and often this is more likely along race lines, but not only, there can be many people working or bigger families in a way that it can be hard to regulate as much or have the resources to have alternatives. So a question of having the structure by which a parent is home or guardian as well, and alternatives. And one thing you see in Screenagers that I just want to change so much is that millions of kids do not have access to after-school programs in this country before COVID. And after COVID, the question is, in this big reset, well, first it's going to take us years to deal with the economic, but what are we going to be at the same time thinking deeply about? And my hope is that we continue to fight to get more after-school programs and programs with connecting youth with mentors, adults, and other youth in positive offline ways. They do positive stuff online. I get that too. But we want to make sure it's not singularly focused. And then I would just add, unfortunately, because of that reality, it does mean for African American Black kids in general are on video games in particular, more often, more likely to have a console in their bedroom. And that is hard. And reaching those parents is so important, because the one thing that I have learned doing this for almost a decade now is parents of all kids, of all backgrounds, all guardians want the best for their kids. And there's hands down, and they really need support and help and resources to make that happen.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is a complicated and unprecedented time. So I feel like movies like yours would be very helpful for adjusting to this sort of new reality. When you mentioned, so your movie covers both video games and like phones, social media, and that kind of technology. I'm curious, since we're a media nonprofit, and so we sort of deal in like screens and movies and television, do you find that sort of movies and TV streaming services have a similar sort of addictive quality, or is it less of an issue?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's a huge concern. I still feel it viscerally as a parent when my now Tessa's 18 and Chase is 21, when they're just decide that they're going to watch a full season. And the fact I tell students is, that the CEO of Netflix said our main competitor isn't Amazon, it isn't Google, it's sleep. Like tech gurus, right? These mega, these 5 companies that rule us, their whole intention is having our attention and our kids' attention at whatever cost. And I think it's important that we really inundate our kids and teens with that information. So it's not us against them. It's not tech companies are bad, but their whole model is more of your time, the better. And so they don't just release an episode like we're used to, right? It's always going to be a whole season. And I remember when T-Mobile came out, they had a whole plan, which was like on binging, right? So it's kind of this binging thing. But when we think about our kids needing sleep, needing all sorts of other things, and the intensity of the shows, I'm very concerned about it. And as we mentioned earlier, I'm so glad that part of the work you do is media literacy in terms of the quality of the content. That said, there is amazing shows, videos, content, YouTube, TED Talks. And I think the more we can empower parents, particularly when their kids are young, to watch some of these great documentaries that are really riveting for kids, as well as little cool TED Talks by kids, by teens, just find those niches of positivity and use that. And I'll end by saying, when I've interviewed a lot of teens about, well, all this technology in school, what is it that you find that you learn the best from? Like, it's a whole new tech revolution. And believe me, there are so much tech companies that all they want it, to infuse the pressure on to getting tech into schools is amazing, getting kids on a screen. I ask them, what is it? Is it what kind of tools, what software, whatever? And they consistently say, oh, the best thing are the videos that we get shown sometimes. We, as humans, we love stories. And if we can use those stories for the positive and decrease the intense negative side of things, that's the work we do as parents. And then that's our own work as adults to also regulate that in ourselves, particularly during COVID, when it's easy to get, and particularly inundated, and to go into a negative spiral, and for our kids too.
Absolutely. So I am curious if you think, since there's all of this new technology coming all of the time, do you think year after year, especially now that we're in a more virtual landscape currently, do you think it's just going to get worse and worse, or do you think we'll become more savvy about navigating it?
Well, yeah, no, I think that human nature makes us so that we want to be in meaningful connections with others, so that we know that kids who were 12, 12 years ago, right? We're in their mid to late 20s now, who were in the closet with Facebook. My friend's daughter saying, I'm addicted. She wasn't actually, but I mean, just like how much she loved it. She is perfectly happy going out with friends and not being on devices and having a full life. So, even though we're being pulled, there are consequences. Some relationships, people are just in their own silos. But we haven't become avatars and only AI and in our not talking and caring about each other. So the good news is we've been in this tech revolution for a while, and we still want the same essential things in our lives. But I think that what I encourage people to do is to be vulnerable in making free time not just be screen time. And what I mean by vulnerable is, particularly as we come out of COVID and we are more engaging and doing social things again, whether you're 25 and you have a friend come over and you just say, hey, let's not be on our phones tonight. Or you're a parent, this is something I used to do, and send an email to friends coming over for dinner and stuff, and say, oh, okay, and let's just all, including our kids and teens, just have it screen free. And then, my kids would kind of roll their eyes a little bit, but they were so happy afterwards. And what was great is that my kids spent more time also with the adults, and you just see them light up when they're having those adult conversations. And the kids played more improv or did all sorts of stuff. So I think that's where there's something right away that we can be doing. And our kids are playing a lot of video games, for example, and connecting on them. That's okay. But can we think outside the box? Okay, how about can they talk to their grandparent? Or is there an older cousin that might talk to them about this place where they can be helping with voting registration? So it's a time of scarcity in terms of connections we used to have and saturation in terms of screen. But if we can get our mindset around scarcity, the fact that we know that that makes you more resourceful and gritty, start to think now, if you're a parent watching, what can I do now to be navigating the aspects that are scarce in our lives, how to find new ways to approach those, whether that's being outside, nature, physical activity, connections with others, being together with another family, cooking together in a funny way, make a funny new recipe. Just keep letting that scarcity help to create new opportunities, and don't let the saturation of screens make your hands go up and say, nothing I can do.
Absolutely. And do you think with all of these new technological advances all the time, do you think there will be a Screenagers chapter 3?
Chapter 3?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Well, yes, because we'll see chapter 2, and it's a good question. And I do have film ideas related to all of this as a third one, because we do know we all love threes, and there are hundreds of topics on all of this. That I just have a new book out called Parenting in the Screen Age. And it is like amazing to me how many topics there are to be talking with our kids and teens about, because I often think to myself, people say, well, we didn't grow up with this, so I don't know how to parent it. And I'm like, there's a lot of things that my parents, my mom, grew up with, and I don't necessarily know how to parent around it. So I think that the more that we engage our kids and teens in insightful conversations, and find ways that they're not defensive with us, all these different strategies will really, as well as parent with integrity or teach with integrity, and tell them why we're doing certain limits here, and we want to hear their values. What do they want, and work with them so that they have a say too. That's going to really help them to parent. And those are the things that make me hopeful that we're going to not just accept kind of a dystopia of everyone on their screen 24/7.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I know that you mentioned that you have worked in the medical field in a lot of different countries, a lot of different areas, and working with people of different cultures. Do you have anything to bring to the table about just trends you've noticed about issues of culture and prejudices within the healthcare system?
Mm-hmm. Well, I did a documentary because my father, before I was born, has schizophrenia. And I had a complicated relationship with him and did this film, but I got really interested in how was it for other cultures, mental health issues. And I decided to do a documentary of that. So I've been been traveling and meeting with other cultures around mental health issues, as well as talking about screen time issues. And it's hard. It's hard when around mental health issues, how much families hide from even within their own family when there are challenges. And of course, that still happens here. But in minority families, it's even more so, in part because this has been an age-old history. When we don't feel like there are solutions, and we think that we're other and different and flawed, like it used to be with cancer before there were treatments, then there's a real tendency to want to not be shown to the community as anything less than what we see as accepted. And the good news is that there is so much momentum. It just continues to grow. And this is another opportunity through COVID, this discussion, we're going to see this hardship about not having a better mental health, public health system in this country that serves low income and different minority groups. We know right now, for example, Black teenagers have had this growing suicide rate that is the highest of any of the different ethnicities. And that just breaks my heart. It really concerns me. And there's a lot of people that care about these mental health issues of our teens. And the goal is that in this reset, we're going to pay more attention, more focus, and hope that a lot of more resources go to this, because the truth is there are a few up at the top with lots of resources, many of them already doing stuff with their foundations, and many who aren't, and many who could be doing more. So we don't want to just leave it up to philanthropy, but it's a combination of many different places that we need to get the resources to make emotional well-being and how it relates to screen time, all of it much more accessible.
Absolutely. And I think that would pair great with all of the films in the Minority Health Film Festival. So everyone should check everything out, especially Screenagers, both Screenagers films. And I feel like we're running out of time a bit, but before we close out, Delaney, is there anything else you want to share with people or resources that people can check out after this is over?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I definitely, Screenagers movie is the place to go. You'll find the podcast and the new book and all the Tech Talk Tuesdays, which you just look up anything, what age to get my kid a phone, video games, all, after school programs, like just so much, because truly that is my hope. And I just want to end by, that this is so hard a time, and our kids are struggling on screen time with having to do school and disappointment and not wanting to do certain classes. And as parents, giving them some agency, but also, and finding other things, what they're interested in learning. So many parents tell me they're worried of their kids getting behind. It's not a race. We're going to be lifelong learners, and digging deep in us to help them maintain a sense of we can get through this. And if I give only one main boundary that is so healthy for our kids, is screens out of the bedroom and consistent during the week bedtime. And when they go into their room, they can read a book, they can journal. It's just their sanctuary without screens. That is the number one message that I like to share, that having discussions about why that's important and seeing if you can find some way to do that at least some nights is another take-home point that I always like to make sure I got into this.
Absolutely.
Because this is about health.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like we could all benefit from not looking at screens before we go to bed.
It's not so much the before we go to bed. There was all this thing, they have to be off for an hour. I just like get it out of the bedroom. Then they go in the room. They can decide how much time they're awake or not, right? You can't tell them what to do in there, but you can say, you know what? There are boundaries. I have to parent with integrity. And and when you leave the house, when you're 18 or come back, you can sleep with screens all over in your room and everything. I'm just going to do healthy boundaries, just like, wearing a seatbelt. This is what we do here. And it's important.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Ruston.
And I'm so excited to do Screenagers next chapter. So I do hope people know that they can come next week. It's going to be great to have with the teens and this whole discussion. So I'm really excited about that.
Mm-hmm. And that panel will be next Saturday, September 19th at 11 a.m. Also on the internet, because everything is on the internet these days. But both Screenagers films are online on our Minority Health Film Festival website for you to stream. Lots of other good films and events for you to check out too. So please tune in for that. But beyond that, thank you so much, and everybody have a great day. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
The 2020 Minority Health Film Festival offers a diverse variety of films and events that we just wouldn't be able to offer in the in-person cinema experience. But I think what really makes it unique is the focus not only on public health issues, but the issues that really concern communities of color. If you're looking for a reason to engage or to try it out, this is the perfect time. Just go to mkefilm.org/MHFF